Welcome to Lawyers in the House with Montlick. Wish you had a lawyer in the family? Now you do. Here's your host, Veronica Waters.
Welcome to Lawyers in the House with Montlick. I'm Veronica Waters. We talk about personal injury each and every week on this show, and personal injury can involve all sorts of accidents and injuries, things that affect victims and their families. But sometimes they can be life-shattering. It's not an inconvenience. It's something that is life-changing. We're talking about catastrophic injuries today on Lawyers in the House, and with me, two incredible and driven attorneys from the Montlick family of attorneys. We have Aaron Montlick and Nick Vicino joining us. Guys, thanks so much for being in the house.
Thanks for having us.
I love having you guys here. And I've already loved getting to know you because you're so fascinating. And so Nick, the straight shooter, Aaron, the Mr. Intellectual. I love the takes that you guys have on these cases, which are so complex, and I'm thinking very emotional.
Indeed, yeah.
Aaron, you became an attorney in 2004.
That's right. It's been a while.
Yeah. What led you to the law?
You know, when you're young and in your 20s, you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. And honestly, for me, it was having a lot of friends who went to law school and feeling like it could be a career that would allow me to engage in my passions, helping people, using my brain to solve difficult problems, and thinking about things that were challenging and intellectually stimulating. And it has been.
Little Birdie said something about you wanting to be a diplomat.
You know, I had family, like a lot of things. I had a great uncle who was an ambassador to a lot of places in the Middle East. And so I grew up around the State Department, and I had thought about going to work for them. I had taken the Foreign Service exam. But while I was doing that, the government was having a hiring freeze. This was years ago. And so I thought, you know what? I should be an attorney. And so I ended up doing that instead. And it's been a good decision. I'm happy to have made it.
I love it. I love it. You know, and I don't mean to leave the impression that Nick Vicino is not an intellectual as well. This guy comes to us by way of Alabama. He's an Alabama native right next door. I'm a Mississippi girl, you know.
That's right.
Southerners up in the house. And you know what? And Aaron from Iowa, you know, you're cool too. We love that you're here. Nick, you became an attorney in 2012.
2011.
2011. Okay.
I had sort of a similar path as Aaron. In my early 20s, trying to figure everything out. I ended up in law school, and thank goodness I did, because I love every minute of it.
Really? So what got you there? I feel like you skipped a lot of stuff. Like, really, what made up your mind?
Well, I always wanted to be an attorney, and after college I decided to work for a few years, and then just thought it was time to move on to the next step.
What were you doing in those years when you were trying to figure out?
I was in governmental affairs doing lobbying type work. Right.
That's fantastic, but that's not what inspired you to go, because aren't a lot of aren't lobbyists like sometimes lawyers too? No,
oftentimes they are. I worked with a lot of lobbyists who had law degrees.
Yeah, and so when did you know that you had done the right thing?
You know, right away. I love representing individuals. You know, I don't do any work on behalf of corporations or anything of that nature. I represent people, regular people, everyday people, and I love it.
Regular, everyday people suffering irregular, not everyday injuries, catastrophic injuries, the topic of the day here on Lawyers in the House. Thank you again, guys, for being in the house with us. I am curious because the industry personal injury has injury right in the name, right? But like I mentioned a minute ago, catastrophic injuries seem to be in a class all their own. What is that? What is a catastrophic injury?
Yeah, there really isn't a bright line between what defines a catastrophic injury and what would be a normal injury. I guess I would say a catastrophic injury, and it comes from the root catastrophe, is something that affects your life in a real, significant, and lasting way, in a way that a normal injury wouldn't. So if you think about a normal car accident, you get bumped in the back. Maybe you have some back pain or some neck pain. It might last you a little bit, a week or two, or maybe a month, and then it goes away. That's not what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. Catastrophic injuries are things like broken bones, things that require surgery. They're things that might leave you paralyzed, unable to walk again. They're brain trauma that affects a person's personality and changes their whole outlook on life. All of those things, unfortunately, happen every day on the roads of this country. People get into bad accidents and they have catastrophic injuries. And they're kind of left with the situation where overnight their life has changed completely.
Nick, are these catastrophic injury cases ones that are easier to handle and maybe settle because the injuries are so bad?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's the opposite. These cases are much more complex. There are potentially millions of dollars on the line, and so an insurance company, has every reason to dig its feet in, fight you at every stage, and the nature of your injuries make things so much more complex. So you need somebody that knows what they're doing if you have sustained a catastrophic injury.
Do these cases then vary a lot?
Yeah, there's no set. I mean, everything is different. Every case is different. Every situation is different. Anytime we as attorneys get a call from someone, and the call is oftentimes from a family member because the person might be laid up in bed and can't even talk, or the first couple of days after an accident. Honestly, there are many, many times when I'll get a call and it'll be a dad or a mom or a wife, and they'll say, "Look, so-and-so has been injured. They've been put on so much pain medication that they can barely even think right now." It's in the first week after an accident. If you've been injured that badly, you can't even think. So, every one of those cases is a different thing. And as an attorney, when somebody calls you and says, "Here's what's happened to me," you have to kind of roll into gear and say, "All right, let's look at this. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what the situation is." And everyone is different.
So then these cases are the ones that end up going the long run? Like these are the ones where you guys end up in court most of the time?
I would think yes. In fact, really what you want, and what both of us are experienced. We've done this for a while, and kind of, right. Yeah, we've. This isn't our first time around the block. And when you've done this for a while, what you realize is that at the very beginning, the moment you get a phone call from someone who says, "I've been injured, and these injuries are bad, and I've broken a bunch of bones, or I can barely walk," that is the moment when you say, "All right, we need to prepare this. We need to view this like it's going to trial." Mm-hmm. And it may not. It may settle. The insurance company may come to the table and want to resolve it immediately. But you need, as a lawyer, to say, this may end up in a courtroom because the injuries are so severe. Catastrophic injuries are the ones where 2 years after the accident, you find yourself in a courtroom with a jury and fighting over what a claim is worth.
Yeah. And if you wait to call an attorney for too long, a lot of that initial evidence is gone. If you wait a month to call an attorney, you're not going to be able to go back to the scene of the accident, take pictures of those skid marks, look at debris that's in the road, and you are behind the eight ball, so to speak. At that point, there's just it's so important for an attorney to start investigating and start working immediately.
When you start talking about these cases, though, like a catastrophic injury, as you said, it could be a broken bone. It could be many broken bones. It could be a life taken. There's got to be... We're going far away from the date of this incident that left me in this situation. Day after day, week after week. Can I work? Do I have any income? Maybe somebody's depending on me for my income. I mean, that's a lot piling up.
Yeah, it absolutely is. People think about the traumatic injury that happens initially, but these injuries are lifelong. Sometimes it could involve an amputation, loss of use of an integral part of your body that you make your livelihood using, and you're going to have lost wages indefinitely. You're going to have medical bills indefinitely. You're going to have medical devices you may need to pay for. You may need to hire help. You may need to hire people or get friends to drive you around and that type of thing. It's every aspect of your life is going to be affected with a catastrophic injury.
I heard one of you say the phrase ongoing losses when we were talking earlier. Is that what that means?
Yeah, I think so. Initially, right after an accident, you've lost things. You've been injured, and you might have huge hospital bills related to the first week after an accident. But when you've been seriously injured, and when those injuries last, the losses that you sustain, the things that change your life in a fundamental way, can last as well. And that includes, as Nick said, the fact that you may not be able to go back to work. We probably both have had many clients who have had early retirements, not because they chose to, but because, for example, they can't be a trucker anymore. I had a conversation yesterday with a good friend who is a client who did long distance trucking and had a wonderful job and could no longer do it simply because he couldn't lift more than 20 pounds, even 2 years after his accident. He had gotten surgery on his back, surgery on his neck, and although those surgeries had healed, he still couldn't do the things that he used to. And those are lasting injuries. And so those are parts of catastrophic injuries that have to be taken into account when you assess a claim with an insurance company or a case against an individual who injured you.
You know what? But Aaron and Nick, not every person, obviously, who gets hurt is a breadwinner. It could be a kid, Nick.
Children suffer catastrophic injuries just like everybody else, and clearly that's one of the saddest things as an attorney that you can see. You get a call from a mother or a father. Obviously, they are completely distraught. Their young child has just been through something traumatic. But one thing that you can see often is traumatic brain injuries for little children. These car seats that we use today are so good. They protect these kids so much of the time, but head injuries can happen as well. And I've handled cases for small children that suffered those types of injuries, and they every aspect, their behavior changes. They are slow to learn things that other children their age would learn, and it's really traumatic for the family.
Talk about ongoing. We're going to dig into one of Nick's cases that had to do with a tiny little victim. This one really touched my heart. I'm sure that it will touch yours too. This is Lawyers in the House with Nick Vicino and Aaron Montlick. I'm Veronica Waters. Stay with us. Welcome back to Lawyers in the House with Montlick. I'm Veronica Waters, here with Montlick Injury Attorneys Nick Vicino and Aaron Montlick. Catastrophic injuries, the topic of the day. They are their own kind of life-changing experience and maybe a bit of a living nightmare. How do you go back to even approaching feeling whole again after something like this?
It's terribly hard, and it takes time. There's so much that goes into it, and you need somebody on your side fighting for you. A few years ago, I handled a case on behalf of a mother and her small child. They were driving through an extremely rural area, and a vehicle that was pulling a horse trailer was not paying attention. It was about to rear end the vehicle in front of it, and to avoid that collision, the driver turned the vehicle into oncoming traffic, hit them head on, hit their vehicle head on. The driver of that vehicle was unfortunately killed as a result. My client, who was in the front passenger seat, was badly injured, and her son in the back sustained a very serious head trauma.
How old was he?
He was 3 at the time.
3. years old. 3 years old.
It's terrible. And, because they lived in such a rural area, it's hard to find the right medical treatment sometimes. Your life has already been turned upside down. You're dealing with these things you never thought you would have to deal with. If you're in a metro area, there are doctors everywhere. You can find child neurologists, pediatric neurologists, psychologists, that type of thing.
Yeah.
It's much harder to find when you're in a rural area. You might have to drive a little bit farther, but you need an attorney that's helping you to find, helping you with everything, but in this specific case, helping to find particular doctors who can really improve that child's condition.
So when it comes to this little tiny tot and making his life better, tell me one thing that you did that you think made the difference in getting a recovery for that family.
Well, one thing we did was a video that you have an expert help to prepare called a day in the life video.
Day in the life.
Yeah. So the way that works is basically camera in a small crew follow this injured party around and document everything that they're doing. Regular things, just getting a child to school in the morning can take so much longer and are so much more involved, and it really helps the jury to understand that injury when you have that video evidence to play at trial.
Nick Vicino, Aaron Montlick, the lawyers in the house with me today. I'm Veronica Waters, and coming up, the incredible truth that not every catastrophic injury is one you can see with your own eyes, at least not the way you might think. That's still to come. Stay with us. Welcome back to Lawyers in the House with Montlick. I'm Veronica Waters here with Nick Vicino and Aaron Montlick. We're talking about catastrophic injuries today. One moment of negligence or recklessness or carelessness or something sudden and unexpected can change your life in a catastrophic way. We have learned so much already on this show, guys. I'm so glad that you are here. If you missed it and are joining us late, don't fret. You can catch us around the clock for the replay on lawyersinthehouse.com. Look us up on YouTube. See these handsome faces sitting next to me. You can also subscribe to us so you never miss an episode on your favorite podcast platform. Lawyers in the House. Look us up, rate and review and subscribe. You are going to, thank me later. Thank me later. I'm thanking Nick and Aaron right now for giving us this education about catastrophic injuries. And something that is fascinating, which is that you don't always see a catastrophic injury, because we keep talking about an amputation, a broken bone, something that you can see him walking around with a cast or whatever it is, a wheelchair, something. But not every injury is visible to the eye.
Yeah, it's really important, especially if you're listening to the show, it's really important to understand that the kind of injuries that last are not always the ones that show up. And that's especially the case if you've hit your head. Traumatic brain injuries are an incredibly complicated and can often be an incredibly damaging type of injury that comes from an auto accident. And as attorneys, we see this every day. People call in. I remember a few months ago, I had a call from a husband. And the husband called me up. He said, I don't know what to do. I'm unsure about this. But, about a month ago, my wife got into an accident. She was rear-ended with her daughters. It didn't seem like it much at the time, but she hit her head. And everything has been different. And we've almost been divorced because of this. Overnight, her whole mentality changed. She started screaming at our daughters. She couldn't handle basic tasks. And she lost her friends. Overnight, it's one of those things that people don't think can happen to them until it does. And it really is a situation where if you've been in an accident and things start to change, or if someone else has been in an accident and you notice that things have changed with them, that is a kind of catastrophic traumatic injury that lasts. And it's helpful to talk to someone who's dealt with that before. Because
That's amazing. I mean, it's just like, I just imagine the light bulb moment that he's like, let me just call somebody and say something to somebody,
Yeah, and as lawyers, we wear different hats. We help people. We're certainly advocates for people. We can be fighters for people, but we're often counselors as well. Because in these sorts of situations, people are going through something they've never gone through before, and having someone who could say, "Look, I've seen this before. You're not alone. Here's the way that you can get better." And in that situation, I said, "Hey, I know a good psychologist. I've worked with doctors in the past who've worked with my clients. Why don't you go get her checked out?"
And then what'd you find out?
And the psychologist said, "Hey, you've had a traumatic brain injury. You've had a concussion. This has changed your life. Here's some things we can do to help." And it's been probably 6 months after the accident, and honestly, she's gotten better. She feels like her life has stabilized, and she now understands what she went through. And that is, if only for that, it is a huge change in someone's life when they can say, "All right, now I understand why my life has changed. Now I understand why I felt this way, why I was yelling at people, why my whole life was different." Because it's not something that you can see. You cannot. There's no broken skull. It's just something that shows up after a while.
It's so scary too, and we've heard how fatal those can be sometimes. We've seen, famous people pass away because they had something happen to them, walked away, thought they were fine. Hours later, they're taken from us. And that's obviously the very worst case scenario, but it's fascinating and certainly something that I'm taking note of, to know that just because I walk away and I might feel fine doesn't mean that I necessarily am. And you have to have somebody maybe who knows you and loves you, right, to be able to point that out. But this is like another ongoing thing, Nick, like it has an effect on everybody around you.
Yeah, and what I would say is that some of the people listening, if you have had a family member that you think has suffered a head trauma, understand that these things can manifest in multiple different ways, and it might not happen overnight. But, clearly headaches, dizziness, confusion, trauma, sometimes, like Aaron mentioned, a complete change in that person's demeanor. So, obviously the brain is the most complex area of the body, and thus these things can manifest in complex and completely different ways. Two people with a similar injury might have two completely different symptoms, and that's why you need to see the right physicians. They can diagnose those things. They can do imaging, and recommend the right treatment.
How do you gauge a dollar amount on a person's personality change? How do you? I mean, that's talk about mystery, right?
Yeah. Well, what I said before, lawyers wear all sorts of different hats.
Different hat.
Being creative is an important part of our job, and part of that creativity comes in at that stage. Where how do you tell either a jury or an insurance company what the value of someone's injury is? And on catastrophic cases, that becomes far more complicated because it's not just a formula. There are situations where it's fairly straightforward. You have a back strain, feel bad for a month. You might look at your medical bills and add a little bit on top. But when you're dealing with lifelong issues or things where someone's life has changed completely, then it really becomes about telling a story. And the story is someone's life. How is their life different than it was before the accident? And the more a lawyer can get into the details of your life, the more a lawyer can tell the story in a way that is not just numbers and figures, but really the person behind it, the more an insurance company or a jury will understand the value of the life they had that was taken away from them by this accident.
Guys, be honest with me. Are these cases ones that make you emotional?
Absolutely. They are, you have to do whatever you can to do the right thing for your client. But of course, you take these things home with you. You're thinking about them. You get to know these people. You care for these people, and you see them going through something terrible, and you can't help but put yourself in their place in your head, or a family member, and it can be very draining for an attorney to have to see these things in and out. But at the end of the day, it's our job, and we have one job, and that's to get a great result for our client. So while it may take its toll on you, you just have to do what's required.
Tell me about a time, Aaron, when emotions were running high and you had to put on yet another one of those attorney caps to maybe slip into a different role.
Yeah. So there are a lot of times, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of times when you get a call as an attorney about a case where someone's still in the emergency room. If you've been badly injured, your stay at a hospital may last a lot longer than a night. It may last a week. It may last a month. And we have gotten calls where I've had to pack up my briefcase and drive down to the medical center and show up to a room where someone is lying in a hospital bed and their life has been changed. And I remember a young lady who I had talked to a few years ago. She had gone up to the attic of a friend's house and did not realize that the attic did not have a floor. It was an unfinished attic, which, if you grew up in the Midwest like I did, doesn't really exist, but they have them down here in the South.
Yes, my house is the same way.
And so she had walked along the piers and then stepped in an area where there was no floor and fell straight through the attic down to the stairs below. And she broke her back in 3 different places. And when I showed up to the hospital, she was in a bed. She had a giant brace around her. And I'm telling you, she was suicidal. She could not believe what had happened to her. She was looking at a world where her whole life had been changed overnight. Just in a blink of an instant. She could barely get out of a sentence without crying. And so as an attorney, that was when I had to put my hat on of saying, all right, I'm your counselor. I have been through this before. I have seen people who have been injured badly, and they end up okay. And I had to tell her, look, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. It may seem dark right now, but it's always darkest before the dawn. And those things are tough. It is hard. You take that home with you because you see someone, a beautiful woman whose life has been derailed in a moment. And you think, what can I do for her? What can I do to alleviate her pain, to alleviate the fear that she has, that nothing is going to be the same? She didn't even know if she would ever walk again. But, people heal, and that is kind of the story you have to tell people. But it's hard. It's real hard.
Are you proud of the recovery that you got for her? Tell me how that ended up.
I am proud. That another thing that lawyers do is they try to be creative. And we were able to tap into, the person whose house she had didn't have any money and was a friend of hers, and so we weren't going to sue her. But she had home insurance, and we were able to make a claim with that insurance. I was able to convince the company that it was an injury that they needed to compensate her for. And at the end, it felt good because she was recovering. She had something to take care of her future treatment and a little bit of money, actually probably more than a little bit, to make sure that her life was at least a little bit easier, even if she had to deal with those injuries.
Nick, what's that feeling like? Tell me about that moment.
It's great, and I'd like to say Aaron's being a little bit modest. He got an absolutely stellar result in that case that he just mentioned, but it's great. I remember one time years ago, I was a newer attorney, and a gentleman had sustained a serious injury. He ended up having to have a neck surgery, a cervical fusion. But when he came into the office after the case had been resolved, he hugged me around my neck and told me that I had changed his life, and I'll never forget that. It was a great feeling. Was
that your proudest moment?
I don't know if it was my proudest. It was. I don't know if I could rank my proudest moments, but that was certainly up there.
It's got to feel good, though. If you are, it's one thing to settle a case, right? Another thing to go to court and have a jury say, "I believe you. I'm siding with you."
Yeah, those are the moments you live for as attorneys. To be able to fight for someone and to be able to take it to the court of law and say, this is a person's life. Because really for personal injury claims versus almost any other ones, you're not just presenting a lawsuit, you're presenting someone's life. And if you can convince a jury of 12 of their peers that person's life is important and that it's been affected, it's an incredibly gratifying experience.
How to pull something hopeful out of something catastrophic. We're talking about catastrophic injuries with Montlick Injury Attorneys Aaron Montlick and Nick Vicino coming up. Montlick's closing argument. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Welcome back to Lawyers in the House with Montlick. I'm Veronica Waters here with Nick Vicino and Aaron Montlick, who've been educating us all hour on catastrophic injuries. What you've been waiting for all hour is now here. The Montlick closing argument. Guys, take it away.
For today's closing argument, Aaron and I would like to discuss 3 extremely important reasons why a caller should reach out to Montlick & Associates. The first one is, and I cannot stress this enough, an insurance company is going to put up a fight when there are millions of dollars on the line. They're not going to spare any expense. They are going to do everything that they can to make sure they pay you as little as possible. An attorney at Montlick's job is to make sure you receive all the compensation you deserve for what you've been put through. We will fight for every step of the way.
The second reason you should call Montlick if you've had a catastrophic injury or if one of your family members has had a catastrophic injury is because we can swing into gear and do the things that need to happen right away. As we talked about before on this show, there are a lot of things that can happen in the immediate aftermath of an accident that will help your claim substantially. Things like scene investigation or coming together with the insurance company to set up claims. All of these things are things that an experienced attorney needs to do in the immediate aftermath of an accident to make sure that your claim and your case is set up the way it needs to be set up so that if it goes to trial or if there's a negotiation, it will be as strong as possible. The third, and in some ways the most important reason to give us a call, is that we want you to be able, if you've been injured in an accident, to focus on getting better. Calling an attorney allows you to take the burdens of the complicated things that come with being a victim of a serious accident off your plate. Let us handle those things. Let us deal with the insurance company. Let us deal with the investigations. And let us help you get better.
Thank you so much, Aaron Montlick and Nick Vicino, for being here to fill us in on what's got to be a complex and incredible layer of the personal injury field. A catastrophe doesn't have to mean that there's no hope. And if an insurance company is digging in their heels, don't you want a lawyer who's going to dig in their heels too? Thanks so much for being with us. We will see you next week on Lawyers in the House. I'm Veronica Waters.